Hello everyone, bachphotography here with another video, and this video is going to be all about how to take amazing photos in seemingly boring locations. We're going to find some locations in the center of the city that I'm in right now, and we're just going to find some locations that aren't that interesting, and then we're going to look at how we can get some really interesting portraits by using the features we have available to us in the surroundings. So my first tip is to find somewhere with an interesting color, and every city is going to have some buildings or some locations, some feature points of the city that have interesting colors, and we chose this wall here because the bricks were a similar color to Hannah's dress, and that creates a nice color scheme in the entire image and makes a photo look more interesting and more like you planned that to happen. So my tip to you is to spend a little bit of time going around the area you're going to be shooting, having a look at the different color palettes you have, and then either matching your model's outfit with the same color as the background of your image, or you can go with complementary colors, for example choosing orange and blue together, or green and pink, or whatever it might be, just to give a little bit of thought into what colors are going to be in your photo and how they can complement each other. I'm going to be leaving the raw files to all of these photos you see in this video in the description, so make sure to look at the description if you would like to edit some of these raw files yourself. My next tip to you is to find areas in your city that have interesting lighting, and it might not be immediately obvious where these things are. For example, this area that we're shooting right now is inside of an elevator landing area, so just keep an eye out for interesting lighting locations. You might see them on the ceilings of places like theaters, you might see them in elevators, you might see them near lighting shops. Anywhere that has interesting lighting is going to be a great place to take some photos. If you're shooting in an area with a lot of lights, such as traffic lights or lots of light bulbs, or something like the area that you can see here, shooting at a long focal length like 85 or above and at a really low aperture of f2, f1.8 or even lower is going to make the background look a lot more interesting, because those lights are going to turn into beautiful blurry blobs of light. And just remember that some of your photos, like this one I took here, are just not going to turn out very well, and it's always better to take lots of photos in different locations so that you can find those really good spots that take amazing looking portraits. And that brings me to my next tip, which is in any location there are always going to be some interesting parts that you can shoot. Especially if you live in a big city like me, there's going to be plenty of little areas that you don't know about that are actually going to turn out to be amazing locations. And that's why it's so important to go to a location before you start shooting, have a scout around, maybe take some photos with your phone as a reference, and find all of those good places that you didn't know about, so that when it's time to shoot, you can come back with your model and take some beautiful photos. If you're enjoying this content so far, I'd really appreciate it if you left me a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out a lot in the YouTube algorithm, so thank you very much for subscribing. Instead of focusing on the big picture when looking for a location in the city, try to find some small little areas that catch your eye. For example, this little red garage space that we found in the center of the CBD. Also see if you can look for interesting shapes or lines in your scene. For example, in this area we had the really bright red lines and the boxy look of the red, and then we had some stripy lines on the ground with the yellow, and then some more of a geometric look with the grey wall on the side there as well. So even though this seemingly looked like a quite boring area, we were able to get some nice color matching with Hannah's dress here, some nice geometric shapes in the photo, and overall quite an interesting image. One easy way to remove any distractions from your background, like a background such as this with lots of messy, distracting things in there, is to shoot at a low aperture with a long focal length, because basically what that will do is make everything in the background super blurry. And this is going to work even better if your focusing distance is really short. So if you're shooting very close to your subject and the background is really far away, the blurrier it's going to be. And you can also do this on a 50mm lens or any wide angle lenses as well, like a 35mm or even a 24mm, just as long as your focusing distance is short, your subject is close to your camera, and you're shooting at a low aperture of about f2.8 or below. And if you're unsure about any of the terminology I'm using in this video, or you'd like to take your portrait photography to the next level, I've just released a full photography course from absolute beginner to advanced. Everything that you'll need to know, from what cameras to use, what lenses to use, what all the settings mean, how to set up your camera on manual mode, all the different techniques like composition, lighting, how to take beautiful portraits from start to finish. I'm going to be leaving in the description a link to that course, along with a 10% discount for the next 30 days. So this next tip is one that I use all the time to get me out of sticky situations when I'm shooting in an area that might not be that interesting. And that is shooting at a long focal length and just cropping out any of the background that isn't really adding anything to the photo. So if I'm taking a portrait and there's nothing too interesting in the background, there's nothing stopping you from shooting at a long focal length and making sure that the crop on the image is really tight and having 90% of the photo being encapsulated by your subject. Sometimes if the background is really interesting and there's lots of interesting things there to look at, then shooting at a wide angle or with a looser crop can be ideal. But when there's nothing in the background that is adding to the photo, it's best just to remove it from your photo. The next thing to look for in boring locations is interesting textures that complement your scene. For example, this brickwork on a house that we found in the center of the city. Even though the bricks might not be that interesting by themselves, they add an interesting texture into the image, which makes the photo more interesting. So now to finish this video, I'd like to show you a few little tips and tricks that you can do in Photoshop or in Lightroom that will help you remove any distraction from the background and make a boring location into a more interesting location on your photo shoot. So now let's open up Photoshop and have a look at what we can do in there. And if you want to follow along, remember the raw files for this photo shoot are going to be in the description. Okay, so in this photo, we have a few things that we can do to draw focus to our subject and remove any distractions from the background, but also just make the whole scene look a bit more interesting. You can see that we've already blurred out the background by using a long focal length, in this case 85mm, and we've been shooting at low apertures of f1.4. But what we can do now is we can get the lasso tool and we can make a selection of the area that we would like to keep sharp, which is going to be Hannah here, but also the thing that is on the same focal plane as her as well. We're then going to go to select inverse, and now we have a inverse selection of the entire image. So we've selected everything apart from Hannah and this little ledge here. Then we're going to go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we can just add maybe 5 pixels in like that, and that's going to make all of the selection even more blurry than it was before. So then we press OK, and then we can even move the selection again like that, just so we don't have any hard lines where we keep blurring the same place and keep not blurring these sorts of areas. And then we can go filter and redo that blur that we just did, or we can go through the motion again, blur, Gaussian blur, and add another 5 pixels or however many pixels that you would like. And you can see now that the background is even more blurry, which removes any more distractions that maybe weren't blurred enough before. And that's just going to make this location that isn't that interesting a little bit more good looking in the photo. So now one extra thing you can do, which is a similar sort of thing, is actually cropping in on photos you've already taken to make the background less of a focus point of the photo and draw the focus of your photo to the subject, which is in this case Hannah. So you can see here that we've got a very busy and not very interesting background, but if we go to the crop tool here and then pressing shift to maintaining the same aspect ratio, we can slowly go in like this and slowly go in like this and just get the areas of the photo that we care about, which in this case is Hannah. So now if we crop something like that and we zoom in a little bit, we can see that this photo is much more interesting than the photo before, because it's much more obvious what indeed is the subject of this image. We have a lot of area up here and all this area here, here and down here that is not really bringing anything to this photo. And at the end of the day, we want to fill our frame with what's important, which in this case is Hannah. So as you can see, this is going to make a much more compelling image, and it's much more obvious for the viewer what they should be looking at. So if you use all of the tips and tricks I showed you in this video, you'll find yourself taking much more interesting photos, even in boring locations, because at the end of the day, any location can be interesting. It just depends on how you use it and whether or not you find the interesting areas in the place that you're shooting. If you liked this video and you've got all the way to the end, please leave a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. I'm also going to leave Hannah's Instagram in the description so you can check that out, as well as my Instagram as well. Feel free to follow me on there, and I'll be posting content behind the scenes and little photos and that kind of thing before it hits YouTube. So that is everything for this video. I really hope you like it. I'm going to leave the video with a few of the photos from this photo shoot. So thank you very much once again for watching, and I will see you in the next video very soon.